We'll get started here in a bit.
Hey everybody, just wanting to make an announcement that also right now the volunteer supporter and peer mentor is having a roundtable with CYC's interim director Robin Allen. Just wanted to ask if anyone is interested that workshop is also happening right now, but also more than welcome to participate and join us at this workshop as well.
Jordan, you need me over there? I'm flexible.
Oh, it's more of just an announcement for any volunteer supporters or peer mentors that were on the call. But yeah, more than happy for you to be here, Kenny.
Just for those of you just joining us, we're going to get started at, do a hard start at 3:10, give people an opportunity to get in here and change, put their pronouns in their screen name. So 3:10.
Let's get some, can we get some music while we wait?
You got any background music, Miguel?
Now we permanent as one in the battle, lost my finger. Mike became my arm, pistol, so it's
We're playing Fuji's.
That's why I left, see that flesh gets scorned. So bad, make you feel like you ain't wanting to be born, John. Tell your friends they that and like my lord, chicken George, you can't let George steal the chicken from my farm. I got the jet bitches. If you're my theosis, then I'm bringing on his Sicilian. Nobody my body made a hand grenade. Girl bled to death while she was tucking in the razor blade. That sounds sick, maybe one day I'll write the horror. Black it up comes to the gas, Jackson Acura. Stevie Wonder sees crack babies. They get the knees in their own families. I'm getting coming to what we soon done. Gun by my side just in case I got the run. A boy on the side of Babylon trying to front like you're down with Mount Zion. Yeah. Ooh la la la, it's the way that we rock when we doing our thing. Ooh la la la, it's the natural law that the refugees bring. Ooh la 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 la. So we think you should come like you never before. Yeah, in salutes we string booms and battle rooms to high noon, bust rap tunes on black spoons, take those shorts like boom booms. See Gucci's, pop Gucci's for Gucci's and Gucci. Find me in my Mitsubishi eating sushi, bumping Fuji's. Hey, try to take the crew and we don't play. Say, like Paul McCartney, I hardly on. Pick it up, I can see right through your mouth. Niggas up and they up when they can't handle us. Bust, cause we fortified, I could never hide. Secretly hot, fried with cold cheese, died. I'm twisted, that twisted by some other Negroes. Don't be moved by polos on the first episode. You shouldn't diss refugees and the whole sound set booty and I have to respect Jersey cause I'm super loud when I'm super high on the Fuji line. La la la, it's the way that we rock when we doing our thing. La la la, it's the natural law that the refugee bring. La 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 la. So we I sit 90 degrees underneath palm trees, smoking BDs as I burn my calories. Brooklyn rooftops become Brooklyn TVs. Who that be? Enemy wanna see the death of me. From Hawaii to Havana, I run marathons like What's going on? I'm a true champion like Farrakhan reaches Delhi Quran. It's a phenomenon, lyric that's like Ramadan. What's going on? Oh, we're getting come, you know when we soon done. Run by my side just in case I gotta run. A boy on the side of Babylon trying to front like it down with Mosiah. What's going on? Oh, we're getting come, you know when we soon done. Run by my side just in case I gotta run. A boy on the side of Babylon trying to front like it down with Mosiah. La la la, it's the way that we rock when we doing our thing. Ooh la la la, it's the natural law that the refugees bring. Ooh la 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 la. So we think you know that I should never be one. Ooh la la la, it's the way that we rock when we doing our thing. Ooh la la la, it's the natural law that the refugees bring. Ooh la 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 la. So we think you know that I should never be one. Yo, kid, we gotta get our family together, man. We gotta get organized. We just can't be out here, you know, high and smoked up and whatever. We gotta get our stuff organized. Whatever we gonna do, we gotta do it right, you know. Catch me.
Record a start? Hey, Miguel. Are we cool right now? Yeah? Okay. Well, let's go ahead and start, everybody. Welcome to the Juvenile Justice Workshop Track. Thank you so much for participating in CYC virtual conference this year. We have a dope workshop for y'all planned for today. Governor Newsom has expressed that he has plans to move the Department of Juvenile Justice to Health and Human Services. CYC believes that this creates a great opportunity to include juvenile justice issues in our advocacy efforts. We are youth with experience in both systems that are building a JJ task force to make sure that youth voice is at the center of juvenile justice reform. So my name is Jerry. I will be your co-host. I'm from Pasadena chapter. And yeah, Jasmine. You're muted.
Hi guys, can you hear me now? Awesome. I see some. Awesome. So my name is Jasmine Harris. I'm with the Alameda chapter. and I'm just really excited to be here. I'm gonna let Jerry talk a little bit more before I get started.
Yeah. So we wanted to get started a little bit, just doing a brief icebreaker. So we wanted to ask everyone a question, or 3 questions actually. Why are you passionate about the juvenile justice advocacy? Number 2, what are your life ambitions? And number 3, what is your favorite food? Does anybody care to start it off?
No, Jerry, we're doing the jam board for the.
Okay, we're doing the Jamboard then. Did you want to help me out with that one?
Yeah, I got y'all. All right, so check it out. The prompt question here. We're about to hop on a app. It's called Jamboard. It's a real cool Google app. Everyone's gonna have access to this. Copying the link. The link is in the chat box for everybody to click. No, not the way. In me. There you go. Everybody click on that link I just dropped on there, and I'm gonna screen share to give everybody the brief tutorial on what exactly we're doing. Let's see, screen share. But what y'all are doing is getting to this screen, right? It's the Google Jamboard. And over here on the left corner, you're gonna see an add image button. So when you click on here, you'll be able to do a Google image search of, whatever. And not potato though. What we're gonna search, or what we're gonna do, a vision board with the question, what does a holistic and trauma-informed approach to juvenile justice look like to you? So everybody, think about that question. I'll repeat it again. Actually, I'm gonna drop it in the chat. What does a holistic and trauma-informed approach to juvenile justice look like to you?
Mm-hmm.
So whatever it looks like to you, go ahead and Google image search that, and put it in this Jamboard for everybody to see. No, I took the potato off because I don't think that's what it should look like. But so we'll give a couple minutes for folks to do that. What does a holistic and trauma-informed approach to juvenile justice look like to you?
For me, it says view only. It doesn't allow me to edit.
Anyone with the view only? Let me see. Thank you for catching that. Let's see. Editor. There we go. All right. All right, everybody, wrap up. Put your last images, and we'll take 2 people. Let's do 3 people. Share out what the image that they put. Move all this so we can all see. See if this last little image loads. If not, could whoever posted the picture with the salad, could you share a little bit about why you chose that, what you meant?
Yeah, that was actually me. Again, my name's Jasmine, and I searched up good food, and that's what came up, and it looked really good, so I chose it. But I chose that just because I think that a lot of healing starts within, and I think that it can be a useful tool to bringing food can be a useful tool to like bringing communities, like having a sit down kind of circle. It can just be helpful with getting your mind right, is having your body feel right, making sure it has the vitamins and nutrients it needs. So that's why I chose the good food salad.
Straight. The person who shared the yoga, you want to elaborate a little bit on why you chose that?
Hey, I'm Alexis. I chose the yoga because I think it's important to like exercise and like meditate. whichever way you want to do that. For me, it's yoga. And also finding something like, I don't know, I did piano when I was young, and then now I just got back into piano, but I wish like people really pushed me in foster care, and then it could have been like, instead of going out and doing this, you could have just been playing piano, you know?
Yeah, that's dope. Health, you know, your physical health, and it's important for your body to be in tune, you know, and music's also so healing. Thanks for sharing. Let's see. All right, and that, I think that's about as much time that we have to share out. Y'all want to go ahead and go into the PowerPoint?
Yeah, thank you, Miguel, for facilitating that. So I want to just give a shout out to Miguel. He's actually our staff support for this workshop, and so he's been really just a huge support in making sure that everything can be finished and ready for you guys today. So with that being said, I'm going to jump a little bit into the history of America, juvenile justice, advocacy around juvenile justice, and just a little bit kind of bring us all kind of up to speed on what's been happening across California and, you know, in time. So we're gonna have a little PowerPoint. And before we get into like the meaty part of our presentation, I wanna actually have like a trigger warning for this entire workshop. You know, the stuff that we're gonna be talking about is extremely real. It's real life experience. Things that may have happened to you or somebody you know. And so I just really wanna invite you guys and remind you guys to take the space that you need. Make sure that you breathe, drink some water. If you need to like stand up and stretch, like do what you need to do to take care of yourself, because that's extremely important and definitely a priority. So with that being said, let's jump in to a really tiny PowerPoint. Why is it like that? Let's see. Small screen, big screen, and prevent. So again, I just want to reiterate. So the point of this PowerPoint is it's going to have a brief recap of American history and talk about, you know, the back, where the American criminal justice system came from. Then we're going to start to understand the school to prison pipeline and how it disproportionately impacts Black, brown, and low income youth, and also system impacted youth, the foster care system specifically. And then I just want to say begin to understand, because these systems are extremely complex. The history behind them is extremely deep. The implicit biases in the policy and the legislation is ridiculous. And so we're just scratching the surface with a lot of these topics, and I definitely encourage you guys to learn more, do your own research, and get involved in your community. With that being said, the next thing we're going to begin to understand is the foster care to prison pipeline and how that interactions with the law can ruin a young person's life. We're going to talk about how to recognize how to recognize how trauma-informed care and holistic approaches can help better rehabilitate youth. We're going to celebrate and learn about some of the policy and practices changes already happening in our community. And then we're going to begin to imagine some better ways to help give youth a brighter tomorrow. So with that being said, the first thing we're going to do is why is this jumping all around? The first thing we're going to do is talk about the history of America. And we're going to watch a short little video to do so. And so this video, it's fun, it's animated, it's really quick paced, and it actually came out of a film about Columbine High. So it's a little bit more specific to gun, but I want you guys to really look out to the key interactions that happen between policy, legislation, private organizations, and just the history of this country. So here we go.
Now it's time for a brief history of the United States of America. Hi, boys and girls, ready to get started? Once upon a time, there were these people in Europe called pilgrims, and they were afraid of being persecuted. So they all got in a boat and sailed to the New World where they wouldn't have to be scared ever again. Oh, I'm so relaxed. I feel so much safer. But as soon as they arrived, they were greeted by savages, and they got scared all over again. So they killed them all. Now, you You'd think wiping out a race of people would calm them down, but no. Instead, they started getting frightened of each other. Witch! So they burned witches. In 1775, they started killing the British so they could be free. And it worked, but they still didn't feel safe. So they passed a Second Amendment which said every white man could keep his gun. I loves my gun, loves my gun. Which brings us to the genius idea of slavery. You see, boys and girls, the white people back then were also afraid of doing any work. So they went to Africa, kidnapped thousands of black people, brought them back to America, and forced them to work very hard for no money. And I don't mean no money like I work at Walmart and make no money. I mean $0, nothing, not a zip. Doing it that way made the USA the richest country in the world. So did having all that money and free help calm the white people down? No way. They got even more afraid. That's because after 200 years of slavery, the black people now outnumbered the white people in many parts of the South. Well, you can pretty much guess what came next. The slaves started rebelling. There were uprisings, and old master's heads got chopped off. And when white people heard of this, they were freaking out and going, "Oh, no, hell, don't kill me, big black man." Well, just in the nick of time came Samuel Colt, who in 1836 invented the first weapon ever that could be fired over and over without having to reload. And all the Southern whites were like, "Yeah!" But it was too late. The North soon won the Civil War and the slaves were freed. Yep, they were free now to go chop all the old masters' heads off. And everybody was like, "Oh no, we're gonna die." But the freed slaves took no revenge. They just wanted to live in peace. But you couldn't convince the white people of this. So they formed the Ku Klux Klan. And in 1871, the same year the Klan became an illegal terrorist organization, another group was founded, the National Rifle Association. Soon politicians passed one of the first gun laws, making it illegal for any black person to own one. It was a great year for America, the KKK and the NRA. They had nothing to do with each other, and this was just a coincidence. One group legally promoted responsible gun ownership, and the other group shot and lynched black people. And that's the way it was all the way to 1955, when a black woman broke the law by refusing to move to the back of the bus. White people just couldn't believe her. Well, I won't say move. What's going on, man? Oh, hell broke loose. Black people everywhere started demanding their rights, and white people had a major freaky field meltdown, and they were all like, "Run away! Run away!" And they did. They all ran fleeing to the suburbs where it was all white and safe and clean. And they went out and bought 250 million guns and put locks on the doors, alarms in the houses, and gates around the neighborhoods. And finally, they were all safe and secure and snug as a bug. And everyone lived happily ever after.
So thank you for watching with us. I know that video was really fast-paced, really a lot to take in. But I want to ask, is there anything that stood out for people as they watched that video? Any questions, comments, concerns?
I like that video.
Who said that? I'm sorry. Alexis?
Yeah.
What do you like about it?
What did I like about it?
Yeah.
I like kind of how it tells the history really fast, but it's also like satire, so it's like funny, but it's like, I don't know. I think it's interesting.
Definitely interesting is the way to put it, yeah. And it is really quick paced. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. It was a little, like, I wasn't really sure at first how I felt about it, you know, the choice of language in some places, but I think it was also really intentional, and they did that on purpose to kind of, you know, bring up thoughts and perspectives. So thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to have anything that came up? Also, I could tell you some more things that stood out for me. So another thing that stood out for me is that, you know, they came to America with the dream of taxation without representation and the intent that all men were created equal. And I think somewhere along the lines that was lost. Another thing I want to talk about is the development of race. So race is a social construct. It was first proposed by German scientists in 1776, and it was based on comparative anatomy, and which he kind of claimed 5 different races. But race has been known to change based on location, skin color, politics, and it basically shows us that race is nothing more than a social construct. Now, the other thing we saw all throughout the video was fear. You know, change is scary now and 200 years ago. And I think that one thing we saw was the lack of collaboration and how the lack of communication created a divide and a fear that, you know, created harmful legislation, harmful policies, and really it really made things worse than it needed to be. And so I want to say one example of a policy that was really kind of detrimental is the creation of the American Police Force. And that actually came to be because it came from the slave patrol. And so that was an entity that was used to catch runaway slaves and oppress other unsupervised Black Americans. And so even after the creation of these systems, there's been more policy and legislation which has been created that has dehumanized and institutionalized men, women, and children. And the criminal justice system has just been one of those. The next slide, we're going to actually watch another video that kind of talks a little bit more about the history of the criminal justice system and where policing came from in America.
All right, we've been seeing images of police officers from all over the country for 9 days now responding to these demonstrations and these protests nationwide. But did you know there was a time when we as a country, America, did not have an organized police force anywhere in the entire country? So let's go beyond the headline this morning and take a look at the history of the police force in America. The law enforcement system we have today wasn't shaped until the mid-1950s. Back in colonial times, there were no police officers. Communities would simply hire someone to act as night watch. It wasn't very effective. Most of the time, the watchman would sleep through his shift or get drunk. The first time we saw an organized law enforcement system was just before the Civil War. Cities set up what they called a slave patrol, a group to prevent slave revolts and hunt down runaway slaves. After the war, these groups switched more to enforcing segregation. And as time went on, police forces focused mostly on protecting businesses in big cities from union organizers and crime rings. The problem? Police forces were controlled by local politicians. In 1929, President Hoover created the Wickersham Commission to look at how effective law enforcement was nationwide. The results of that commission led to the creation of independent police precincts that were separate from political parties and are more similar to what we have today. All right, over the last year, CBS News has surveyed more than 150 police departments across the country. At least 69% of departments that were surveyed said they do have racial bias training, including the Minneapolis Police Department. They said they've been teaching bias training since 2015 and de-escalation training since before 2005.
So again, I always want to open the floor up to any comments, questions, or concerns before we continue. And okay, so I just want to reiterate that, you know, historically there's been a criminalization of the urban setting, poverty, and ethnic background. And I want to remind us of the famed 13th Amendment that, you know, everybody quotes it for ending slavery, but it really stated that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, where the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. So really what that constitutional amendment is saying is, yeah, we're not going to have slaves anymore unless they've been convicted of the crime.
All right, we've been seeing images of police officers.
So really what this did was kind of serve as a promise as like, as long as you have criminals, you have slaves. And it kind of gave these slave patrols and police departments new purposes at this time. As you also see and saw in the video, they mentioned fighting against union representation. So again, it's police versus the working class. So I think it's really interesting as you start to look into the history of the policy and legislation behind policing and like who are they really here to serve and protect. And so with the next slide, I'm going to talk about the criminalization of youth and how the school to prison pipeline became so prevalent in America. Ray, go ahead and like drop a little raised hand emoji if you've heard of the school to prison pipeline, if that's a term you've been familiar with, or like you might have. I saw Maribel kind of wave a hand in the screen. If that's something you've heard. Alexis, I see Susan and Serena, we got some thumbs up from Michael. Awesome. So I'm gonna just jump into it. So the school to prison pipeline, it is often referred to as a cradle to prison pipeline, but it's a set of practices that penalize and criminalize youth from a young age. And so that cradle to prison pipeline comes from just the idea that these are starting this this over policing, or these suspensions and expulsions are starting from literally kids in diapers in preschool and pre-K. So it's literally a pipeline. And before even that, I want to talk about the purpose of the criminal justice system. So the first act or juvenile court in the United States was in 1899. It was a bill that came out of Chicago, but it was Illinois. It was a statewide bill. But basically that act gave the court jurisdiction over neglected, dependent, and delinquent children under the age of 16. And so the focus of that court was rehabilitation rather than punishment. But again, somewhere along the lines, they forgot that. We're gonna watch another video. I like videos because I think they're quick, they're to the point, they're interactive, they look good. So I like videos because they can explain things better than me just talking at you at a screen. But we're gonna watch another video that talks about the school to prison pipeline. And so here's that. Oh, and we gotta add. You guys like Rick and Morty?
Come on, dude, you got
Okay.
There's this phrase that you might hear in the news sometimes, the school to prison pipeline. It's shorthand for how schools are funneling students, especially Black students, into the criminal justice system. It started in the 90s when schools responded to fears about crime with zero tolerance policies, which mandated suspensions and expulsions for certain violations. They also cracked down on little things like talking back or uniform violations. The hope was that it would keep bigger problems from bubbling up. But as a result, out-of-school suspensions have doubled since the 1970s, and they keep increasing even though juvenile crime rates have now been dropping for years. Around the same time, the number of police officers stationed full-time inside schools has increased by a third between 1997 and 2007. Ostensibly, they were there to prevent mass school shootings like the one at Columbine, but they end up being a way for schools to basically outsource discipline to the police. Schools with officers have 5 times as many arrests for disorderly conduct as schools without them. Sometimes the results are shocking. But the less visible effect is that schools are feeding the racial disparities in the criminal justice system. Consider the fact that schools are more likely to have an officer on their campus if the student population is more than 50% Black. You might assume that that's because there's more crime at these schools, but although students at police schools are more likely to be arrested, they're not actually more likely to be charged in court for weapons, drugs, alcohol, or assault, at least according to one study. During the 2010-2011 school year, 1 in 6 public school students in the US were Black, but they accounted for 1 in 3 arrests at school. Same goes for other forms of school discipline. Black students are suspended or expelled 3 times more frequently than white students. It actually begins in preschool. 18% of preschoolers are Black. But if all preschoolers suspended more than once, 48% are Black. Studies show that differences in behavior can't fully account for these disparities. Black students and white students are sent to the principal's office at similar rates, but Black students are more likely to end up with a serious punishment. One study found that white students are more likely to be suspended for provable offenses like smoking or vandalism. Black students are more likely to be suspended for subjective offenses like talking back or insubordination. Students who are suspended in school are more likely to later drop out or get arrested. So the federal government is asking schools to make suspension and expulsion the absolute last resort. In Oakland, California, public schools are trying something called restorative justice, where both parties in a conflict talk it out with a counselor instead of relying on punishment. The results are pretty encouraging. In the last 10 years, chronic absenteeism is down and graduation rates are up in the schools that have tried it. Other cities and districts are also trying new policies. They're hoping that if their students end up in the criminal justice system, at least it won't be because the schools push them there.
And I actually live in Oakland, so I thought it was pretty cool when I found that video. They were talking about my hometown. But is there anything
There's
else
this phrase that you might hear.
Does anybody want to speak on that video? Just want to open the floor.
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
So I actually, from experience, my little brother got expelled so many times from school, and he was Black, and so the amount of times that he got expelled compared to other students within the same grade level was astronomically different in terms of how he was treated in school discipline. He would come home crying sometimes and say, like, why does the school hate me? Why do my classmates hate me? And it created a lot of like conflict within his own self in terms of his identity and his skin color, because he was like, why can't I look like the other classmates? They don't have my skin color, they don't have my hair texture. And he would ask to get his hair conditioned because he was treated so differently in school. So that video does touch upon like the disparity of treatment within school discipline, and just the amount of times that a Black student gets in trouble versus another person of color it's very obvious the difference of how they're treated.
Thank you for sharing that. That's real.
I think so too. That's happened to me. I've had my social worker not want to give me a bus pass. And then I'm African American because my dad's from Africa. So I can't speak on, I know we have this thing, but yeah. So my social worker went to my school and demanded that they gave me a tardy, like a truancy ticket, even though she refused to give me a bus pass. So there was no way I could go to school.
I'm sorry that there's nothing for me to say because there's so much frustration for you, that I feel for you, and like, yeah, the way that the systems have failed us. Would anybody else like to share? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the next slide. Thank you guys for sharing. Oops. Let's see. So the next slide actually is talking about another pipeline that's really prevalent in America, and it's the foster care to prison pipeline. And so the foster care to prison pipeline, similar to the school to prison pipeline, is a term used to describe a set of practices and policies that funnel youth from the child welfare system and into the criminal justice system. So we've noticed that juvenile justice involvement has particularly adverse effects on foster youth because it can impact their treatment and home placement for the rest of their time in foster care. So what this looks like is the creation of the level system. And there has been a lot of legislation, the AB 504 and the continuum of care reform is one specifically that has been trying to, fight the policy that has created the institutionalization of youth. But unfortunately, we do notice that when youth are in these higher level placements, that they usually stay there for longer amounts of time, whether that means, just moving from high level placement to high level placement, or just not getting the support to rehabilitate back into a more conjugate or a family setting kind of home. And so a lot of times it's bouncing around between halls, camps, group home settings, and it can go on for the span of 18 years, like youth whole lives. Like it's pretty crazy. And so looking at these practices, looking at these policies, and also looking at the long-term effects. So even after aging out of the system, or even after being rehabilitating, looking at how interaction with the system can affect access to housing, employment, financial aid, sometimes even like access to food stamps and social services, and many more services. And so I'm not sure if any of you guys are familiar with the ACE studies, but we've also noticed that youth who have experienced childhood trauma or adverse childhood experiences are more likely to come in contact with the system, and are more likely to have long-term interactions with the system, multiple interactions with the system. And so looking at these ACEs, known ACEs, and looking at how we can, more accurately support youth. And I was able to find a video that, me and my videos, actually Miguel helped me find this one. So I'm gonna blame this video on Miguel if you don't like videos, but I actually found a pretty cool Miguel found a pretty cool video that talks about ACEs and how they interact with the juvenile justice system. But we just noticed that the ACE study has shown that adverse effects in childhood have long-term effects on outcomes, both like physical health, mental health, and also just success and well-being. And so I'm going to play this video that talks a little bit more about the ACE studies and then talked about how it interacts with juvenile justice and system impact with youth.
Everyone is touched by ACEs. Adverse childhood experiences affect the lives of people of all ethnic groups and economic backgrounds. The long-term outcomes impact the health and well-being of the individual, as well as those in the community around them. But those experiences are fact, not fate. We all have a part in healing and changing the culture. Adverse childhood experiences cause psychological and physical difficulties in childhood that extend into adulthood.
There's definitely a strong link between children who experience adverse childhood experiences and ending up into the delinquent system or the criminal justice system. What the studies also showed is that when a child has adverse childhood experiences, 4 or more, that there's a much stronger likelihood that they're going to end up in the criminal justice system.
Trauma and the adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, affects almost every single family we see. My guess is it would be upwards of 90% of the families.
We don't want necessarily juveniles to be placed in the system. And if there's things we can do to keep them out of the system, then that's what we're going to do. We try not to allow kids to go through the system because putting them in the system is an adverse childhood experience in and of itself.
The general public needs to understand these are not bad kids. The single act of a 15-year-old or a 14 is just that. It's a single act. They need to be held responsible for their actions. They need a system that respects their future. What the public doesn't, I don't think they think about long-term, is that these children are coming out of prison. They're not going to be in prison the rest of their lives. They're going to come out as adults. Their brains are going to mature in a prison system that does not respect their future. Prison is not a place of training. It's a place of punishment. It removes you from society based on the law that says you're going to be locked up for X number of years. We're not going to give you an education. You can get one, but we're not going to give it to you. We're not going to give you training, and you're going to come out at 35 or 45, and your brain is going to have matured in a prison system that has no respect for that future. So as a society, we need to ask ourselves that question. Are we going to continue to treat individuals who break the law as perpetual criminals? Or are we going to recognize the humanity in the person and figure out a way to turn that person around and make them a productive citizen?
So before I continue, I want to open the floor. Would anybody did anything stick out for anybody watching that video? Comments, questions, or concerns?
I think it's sad that to get a quality education, you pretty much have to pay for it or be like of high socioeconomic status.
Mm-hmm. Right. Talking about access to education, resources. Yeah, that's real.
Definitely want to highlight just one of the points he made in regards to when you come out, you're already really late in the game. 30, 40 years old, and there's already all the situations. Let's say you're hopefully not the case, but if the case is, like, let's say you're a felon, really just the setbacks of even finding an employment and even getting out of that position through policy and trying to make an effort through that. Although you cannot vote, your vote will not count being a felon. Your taxes are more than welcome, right? And they will definitely want to take your money. So it's very oppressive and very systematic as to how these systems are really in charge of really keeping you in the situation that you're at and not letting you really get out of it. It's very, very detrimental to our communities because we just really want to just push each other to do good, right?
Right. You mentioned a point I'm going to come up, I'm going to bring up again later, but keeping you where you're at, keeping them in the system, yeah, it's a problem, right? We talk about the institutionalization. We talk about how it's a systemic problem because it's just a cycle that just keeps on going and it feeds into itself as a system. So I really thank you for sharing, Jerry. That's it is deep to say the least. And actually that's why systems must change, is because it is so deep. So I was thinking about it why do I think systems should change, personally? And I think, it's to build community for one. I think currently right now, everything is very punitive. It criminalizes young people. It tears apart homes, communities, families. A lot of people who enter a lot of people who enter foster care are entering through the juvenile justice system. And whether that is the best method or, getting community, getting family support, trying to find alternative practices, I think is really important. For example, restorative justice is one I think that really, brings youth together and in this community-based manner. And then I think the other one is, again, to heal and rehabilitate. So that was the goal of the system. People do make mistakes. People do, sometimes have some things to work through. Sometimes people do need, a space to take a time out and, or take a break from reality and, work through some things. But if that's the case, it shouldn't be, they're not an animal. They shouldn't be, thrown behind bars and locked in a box and, kept without, not treated like human. That's not going to help anybody, let me tell you. And so I think the system involvement should be productive. And I mean, that's across all systems, right? You shouldn't be coming out of care more traumatized. And you shouldn't be coming out of the hall, same thing, any kind of setting, the same thing. And so I talk about youth autonomy and healing and community equals successful adults. So, and so on the right side of this slide, actually, you see some allegations made in the Farrell litigation. And so this was actually, when we talk about why systems must change, a lot of systems feel like they have to change because of lawsuits that have actually come out where people have held them accountable. They said, you know what? There's severe abuse of powers going on by staff. Staff are indifferent to protect youth safety from assault, sexual assault, rape, lack of education, lack of abuse, lack of mental health care, right? Just the list goes on and on. Of overuse of solitary confinement, overuse of physical force, all of these things, everything that was going on, that was like, you know what? You're hurting our youth, you're harming our youth, and you're holding them against their will, against the will of the community. And, it's not helping anybody, and so I'm going to mention what Jerry was bringing up earlier about Jerry Brown and his shift. As we do this, as we realign, I think it's really important to think about the community and how we can help and heal these youth to be integrated back into the community as, not even integrated because they shouldn't be separated, but, really, how do we help these youth? And with that being said, it's how do we make change, right? Education is a start, right? So I want everybody to go ahead and give themselves a round of applause or a pat on the back for coming here today, right? You're already doing step one is creating the space for conversation, having the conversation, putting yourself in a position to learn and opening yourself up to that. The second I would say is advocacy. So, okay, you can educate and now you can advocate. So sometimes people don't want to learn. So you have to advocate and tell them why it's important to learn or why it's, critical to change or, it takes advocacy sometimes to educate. And then with that comes the practice change, right? And sometimes the education comes after the practice change if need be. If need be, look, we're gonna show you how to do it, and you'll learn while doing it, if that's the case. And then the fourth being holistic approaches. So like looking at whole youth health, looking at like everything that's going on in youth life, and really trying to make sure it's comprehensive support. And so I'm gonna show another video, and this is just another video from a judge. And she's advocating and she's educating, and I just want to show you how quick and how easy it looks like. It can look like 3 sentences. And so watch this.
Good afternoon. I'm Maria Hernandez. I am the juvenile presiding court judge here in Orange County. I would like the public to know that our foster youth are not broken children. Our children are subject to so much trauma by the very nature of them being brought into the system at no fault of their own, that the general public needs to be aware of the trauma, complex, acute, chronic trauma that they've been exposed to, and the type of behavioral reactions that they may have as a result of that. Fortunately, in my position here, I've been at juvenile court for about 7.5 years. I've had the opportunity to see some.
So super quick, why do you guys think I showed you that video? Like what stood out, or why do you think it was in any way relevant?
Because it showed an intersection. You have a judge that's advocating for a change in policies, and the judge seemed to have a mental awareness of what's problematic, and while sitting behind the bench.
Right. So one, I want to point out a couple things you pointed out. The fact that she's a judge, right? So she used her status to elevate her. But I also want to say her experience, right? I've been here for 7 years. She used location, that was one thing. So, you know, she made sure she was looking spiffy with her little cardigan on, and her background looks nice, like she knows what she's talking about with all those books. But yeah, so sometimes it's where you advocate. It's, you know, using your experience that you have, using your name, your network. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else want to share?
I want to share. Oh. Go ahead, Alexis.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say there's a quote I shared that kind of relates to what the judge was saying, and I think Jasmine really liked it a lot, which was trauma enabled us not to care, in the sense of like, she really hits on home when it comes to like all the trauma and all the acute hurt that was received. It gets to a point where you know what right and wrong is, but you just really choose not to care, not to really respond to the consequences. You just are enabled not to care, which is a very deep wound to really be located at. But definitely it's really empowering to hear a judge really speak on that matter and really elevate really the perception of what it looks like for a person, for a juvenile justice youth in that situation, right? So I want to applaud her hugely for really speaking on that for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Alexis?
I just wanted to add that, like, I don't know, sometimes like education is like a thing for people. So like, I like that she's like older and she's educated, so like it's not just like a foster youth or something saying we need help. It's actually like the institution itself technically like also stepping up and saying we see that there's a need and you guys like aren't not heard. That makes sense.
No, yeah, that made total sense. I think that's really real, right? So we talk about collaboration. It is a team effort. We need everybody at the table. I want to give a shout out actually to Mario. He's an IOP worker from Alameda County, and I actually saw another one. I saw Miss Monica on the phone too. So right, it's about everybody coming together, stakeholders coming together, everybody using their voice, using their power, using their education, and advocating for change. Right? We can't, and holding those in charge accountable. Also, you know, we can't make progress if we don't know how to, right? And so we have to show people how to. We have to demonstrate how to. We have to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just, you know, I asked the question. Some people are new to trauma-informed care, right? They're like, oh, I'm not a social worker. Like, I'm a teacher. Why do I need to be trauma-informed? Like, because let me tell you, trauma is everywhere, and it's a reality. And so if we can learn how to properly and more efficiently work with each other and support each other, we can all come together as a community, and we can do more and just be better and be stronger and just be even more amazing. And so with that, the question, like, what does trauma-informed care have to do with court and the legal system, bringing it back to, juvenile justice and the criminal justice system? One example is, it looks like Senate Bill 1296. And so that's a bill that actually bans the incarceration of truant youth. And so I really like this because before we talk about the school to prison pipeline, oh, you've missed too many days to school. Somebody was talking, actually, Alexis, I think you mentioned it earlier, you got a truancy ticket, but before people have even been arrested for it. So, if it's like you missed too much school, you're going to jail now. Like, now you're on probation, now you're here, now you're there. Like, how does that, what is, like, it's a slippery slope, basically. So, like, instead of locking somebody up and throwing away the key, how do we ask, like, why are you missing school? How we trauma inform? How can we as a team better support you? Like, what's going on at school? So thinking about how to, again, have that more comprehensive and holistic approach, not just seeing the youth as, oh, that's an action you did, that's a mistake you made, and you're a bad kid, put it on their case because their life's over, right? So how do we support youth properly? And so what are some other ways? So we talk about this realignment that's happening at a state level, but also making sure that that happens at a local level. So when we talk about, the school to prison pipeline, again, another thing we notice is that a lot of schools were outsourcing their discipline to police. That's actually like a quote from the video. I like the way they put that, because instead of, like, teachers kind of went into this like, oh, my job's here to teach, the police are here to discipline. So when something goes wrong in my class, call the police, like, they'll deal with it. It's like, no. Let's take it back a notch, right? Like, okay, you're engaging your student in a classroom and something happens, like, let's realign, right? Let's de-escalate the situation and let's, move on. We don't need to make it, so now this is a police interaction, now this is a suspension, now this is expulsion, this is that on your record, this is juvenile hall, this is probation violation, now you're, this, now you're that, now you're removed from home, now you're in care, like, right? Where it's this system that youth get caught up in. And we want to, and I want to say youth get caught up in, and especially Black, brown, and low-income youth get caught up in. And so how do we realign and take things back to the community and make sure that, we're properly supporting these youth? And so with these realignment, it also looks like using local agencies. And so this creates an individualized and culturally responsive service. And this also, when we are doing culturally specific stuff or geographically specific stuff or anything specific stuff, community-based stuff, it's able, like, you see it on the slide, it says local agencies are better able to address their needs, but really it's because they're able to see their needs and understand their needs because they're a part of the community, right? They're right there on the ground with the youth. And so huge advocate for community-based organizations, but again, huge advocate for collaboration across the board. And so that actually brings us down to point 3, talking about collaboration. And so right now, special interest groups have a lot of influence on the justice policy in California. And I want to specifically mention this: private corporations and organizations do. These private companies profit off of full beds, profit having more people, more kids in their beds, in their prisons, in their camps, in their wherevers, right? Like they make money off of the being full. That's a whole nother thing, but I just want to reiterate that. And so instead of, letting these people dominate the playing field, it's getting advocates and getting criminal justice stakeholders bringing them to the table together and really, creating I'm sorry, I'm not laughing. I am laughing because what does it really look like? It looks like good, happy change. It looks like stakeholders and advocates coming together and making change, making tangible change, making policy change, making practice change, changing the law if it needs to be, going up to the legislature, having the governor sign the bill and say, hey, this is not okay. We got to do it differently. And look at this year. And criminal justice, instead of juvenile justice, instead of being under the Department of Criminal Justice, is now under the Department of Health and Human Services. So instead of looking at it as this criminal offense that you need to go deal with the criminal justice, we're looking at it as you need social services, you need support, you need help, you need rehabilitation. And I just really think that that really brings us back to what we're doing, or what the system was trying to do originally. And I think it helps us really support and elevate everybody's experience. And so that brings us down to the last point, sentence reform. And so when we talk about the disparities in the system, it's apparent, and it's especially, we actually see it even in sentence reform. So this might look like, you know, we could say white man A and black man B both are charged with the same crime, and white man gets served 1 year and black man gets served 10. And so it's like, when we see stuff like that, and there's I'm saying no difference, right? They're exactly the same, and we're seeing these disparities, it's like there's no excuse anymore. There's no excuse. And so that's why it's really important to have data-driven sentence reform. So the data is there, the numbers are there to pack it up. It helps us keep it educated. It helps us keep things on the helps keep the people in charge accountable, but it also helps us have a fair and effective system. And it also lets us know who we're serving and how to better, who we're serving, how the system impacts them, and how to better support them.
Oh, time check, Jess.
Okay.
They need time to read the case studies.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna get into the little stuff on this slide. I just want to say really quick, again, creating it, what has juvenile, now I'm tripping over my tongue. All right, guys, we're gonna get this done. So I just want to talk about juvenile justice advocacy again. So collaboration.
She okay?
Yeah, it looked like her computer probably turned off, or her internet is laggy. Give her a couple seconds here to reconnect. And I'm gonna go ahead and set up the next activity. I'm dropping a link into the chat, y'all. So yeah, she frozen. All right.
Oh, sorry to cut you off. Where can we find the recording from this? This is great. Thank you.
Oh yeah. We'll definitely make sure you get you get a copy of the recording. But we're gonna go in and go to our last activity. I'm gonna step in here until Jazz gets back. So we're gonna examine some case studies, and you know, we wish we had a little more time to go through them. But in this, check the chat for a PowerPoint. And in that PowerPoint, you're gonna see 6 slides. Every 2 slides, there's a case study, and then there's a diagram. Jerry, really briefly, I'm gonna put up the image, and go ahead and explain to people about the image. You know what I mean?
Cool. Yeah. So what we're gonna be doing right now is we're gonna be looking at a few profiles of a few youth that have had experience with the juvenile justice system, or both, either foster care system and juvenile justice system. So the purpose of this exercise is to really understand what the process of how we process behavior, and how does it look like, what are the filters, emotions, and what does that have to do with the external event, right? So I'm gonna give you guys an example, just to not really go into the actual profiles, to not give you guys the answers, but I'm gonna make up like kind of a scenario just to give you guys an idea of what the activity will look like. So an external event for me could be, I am a 15-year-old Latino. I have been in a SGRTP sighting twice. I first came into the DCFS system at the age of 13, and I'm actually in SGRTP the second time because of an aggravated battery assault case. So some of the things that could possibly be going on for the filters is like, what are my values? What are my beliefs? So my belief is like, honestly, like it's I'm staying true to my family. I'm gonna be disconnected from them. I'm gonna, there's that disconnection. There's that longing for affection, and for the emotions part, it connects to like how will I feel like, right? So that's gonna make me feel either depressed. Is gonna bring up a lot of anxiety because of the separation, how many times this has actually happened to me, and it could also relate to another triggers that you have experienced before in the past, right? So what we're gonna be looking at in these profiles, for example, Brenda, is like how what is an external event. So we're going to be going over like identifying an external event from Brenda, what are her filters, what are her emotions, and identifying the delinquent behavior. We can do that as clean as possible. Miguel, do you want to help me breaking everybody out?
Yeah, I think that's Blade. Blade's got the host. So Blade, go ahead and let me, before you bring everybody up, just to recap. So every on slide 1, 3, and 5, there's a case study. So on slide 2, you're filling out for case study 1, right? For slide 4, you're filling it out for case study 3, and 6 for 5. To reiterate, external events, just identify any external events, any interactions that happen in this case study. Your filters are like Jerry explained, values, past experiences. Identify the filters from the youth perspective in the case study. And then identify, what emotions that might bring up to them, and then the delinquent I put it in quotes, right? Delinquent behavior that we deem delinquent, but we're talking about shifting to trauma-informed care. So identify how the behavior kind of materialized. But everybody clear? Anybody not clear on the instructions?
No questions. All right.
And we'll have CYC staff in the groups as well, kind of helping facilitate conversation. But we're going to do this really quickly for about like 10, 15 minutes. We'll check in about 10 minutes, see where people are at. Last call for
Miguel, how many case studies were there? So I can make that many quick errors?
3.
3, gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, well, I am all ready.
All right, thank you.
We'll see you. We'll talk to y'all soon. It looks like we lost Jazz again. But thank you everybody for participating in the activity. I think the presentation went a little more, like we had originally planned for y'all to have more time to go through stuff. But in Brenda's group, could someone share out, one of the some of the delinquent behavior, that she displayed, and some of the filters that you think might have contributed to her acting out like that, and emotions that might have contributed to her acting out?
So, hey, I think some of her filters were, I think we talked about like her not having that supportive figure, like authority figure, because her mom was like on drugs and everything. And then also her being a Black woman, and like how we are like forced to grow up like much more, and how we are perceived, and how we have to act more conservative in order to fit in, and talking about like non-people of color versus people of color, like, and how they can act in society. And I forgot what the other thing was. Sorry.
No, it's great. I'm glad you brought up being a Black woman in America, because being a Black woman sits at the intersection of two of the most oppressed, life experiences. So when you factor that in, that's that's really important to highlight. So thank you for highlighting that. And then for Valerie's group, can we get the same, just a little report back of some of the, the quote unquote delinquent behaviors and some of the filters that might have contributed, to the way she kind of was perceiving stuff?
So I was in a group with 3 other people. We were going over Valerie's profile, and there was a couple things that we identified as far as external events for Valerie. Valerie had a couple of issues. First, starting at the age of 13 and 14, that eventually led her to being locked up in a treatment facility, an example of Phoenix House. So that could be the external event. The filters are the fact that she is a Latina. She is very, like we talked about, is a population that is very heavily under represented, or very in a way, like in their way, oppressed for just not wanting them to be successful, right? So the PO would really push for her to serve time, to serve all these sorts of junctions, but her emotions really would come up to be upset, shame, confusion, and the delinquent behavior could be her petty theft, just things that would really seem like there could be some restorative justice approach, instead of getting to the point of her really sitting and falling really deep within the system. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Thanks for sharing. And then finally, let's get somebody from Nicole's group. The same thing. Go over some of the some of the delinquent behaviors that were presented in the case study, and identify some filters that might have contributed to how she reacted to stuff and external events.
Who's in Valerie's group? I mean, Nicole's group.
Hey, everybody. Jordan here. Had the pleasure to work with Susan, Michael, Rolando on the group. So feel free to pitch in on my debrief on the activity. But some external events that Nicole faced from this testimony was neglect, sexual abuse, witnessing Nicole's father going to be incarcerated at a young age, at age 16, as well as had experience and affiliation with gangs and prostitution. What was considered, according to the case study, what systems classified as the delinquent behavior was theft. I think there was also, like the teacher mentioned, that getting mean stares from Nicole, and that wrote a letter to the principal, so classified as harassment, gang ties, and as well as when Nicole was placed into Girls Town congregate care and ran away. AWOL was the term. And as far as emotion, just we all share like how we felt, and assuming what was feeling of if we face these external events. And I shared that, you know, a lot of the places, locations, systems that they were identified hit really close, since Nicole's case study took place in LA County, specifically near Long Beach, that a lot of the places hit home. Susan, Rolando, Michael, is there anything you would like to add from our conversation?
You know, I just wanted to say that at a very young age, this young lady has been exposed to some really traumatic life events, you know, from like you mentioned, you know, gangs, drugs, seeing family members being incarcerated. And then I think she was very, you know, she was going through so many emotions, and anger was one of them. You know, the little blurb about where she talked about how she was angry at the teacher and the way she would stare at her. So she was going through a lot. But that's one of the things I wanted to share, you know, just like everything that she has been through in such even as you read it, before the age of 13, she had experienced a lot of serious trauma in her life.
Yep, true words have never been spoken. So yeah, hopefully, you know, the whole purpose of that activity was for folks to read some. By the way, we didn't mention that these are real life case studies. They're actually based in, you know, real stories. The whole point of it was to really go through, you know, these experiences and dissect, you know, like, because humans are never only one thing. So when we label youth, especially delinquent, doing this, it's not that they're delinquent. It's that like so many systems have failed them leading up to that point. You know, so you know, just taking the whole person into account and all of the entirety of their experiences, and not just damning people to that delinquent label. But yeah, Jazz, Jerry, we'll throw it back to y'all. Let's wrap it up. It's done.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we got time for that last activity, so let's wrap it up.
Yeah. Jasmine, do you have anything to say?
I just want to thank you all for being here. If you have questions about things that you saw on the PowerPoint, or you want to know where to find more information about anything that was shared, definitely I want to encourage you guys to reach out to us. Reach out if you're interested in hearing more information about the Juvenile Task Force as that's coming into fruition, as well as if you aren't a CYC member, aren't somebody who's active with CYC, we definitely encourage you again to reach out. And so, you know, CYC's on Instagram, Facebook, all the cool social medias at Cal Youth Con. And we can drop that in the chat too. So I just really want to thank you all for being here. And I'm going to pass the mic back to you.
Definitely. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. We're very excited to continue furthering the research and the education regarding juvenile justice. Thank you guys all for coming today. It's definitely been a pleasure. Appreciate all your guys' participation. Everybody's been amazing. Thank you guys all for coming.
And
thank you.
I know that one thing that we didn't get to talk about as much as we wanted to was alternative practices. And so if you want a handout with that kind of, it's kind of, if anything, it'd be like a vocab sheet if we made that into a document. But if you were interested in that vocab sheet, just to have some like terms to recognize, that's something else we can also share with you too. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Alexis. Appreciate
One
that.
other thing, sorry, can I interrupt? Kate made me put this plug in. CYC Talk /talent show /performance. Come and join the meeting today. It's going to be at 6. I dropped the link below on the chat. It is, please come and join us and show off your great talents. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary B. Appreciate that.
Thank you guys so much, and continue the great work. Like I know you're doing it because you're here right now. So keep it up.
Yeah. Keep advocating, y'all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks for joining us, Alexis. It was great to have you.
Same, it was great being here. That was so good.
Y'all presentation was on fire.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Whoop, whoop. I am stopping the recording now.